Hello, and welcome to Shadow Me Next, a podcast where I take you into and behind the scenes of the medical world to provide you with a deeper understanding of the human side of medicine. I'm Ashley, a physician assistant, medical editor, clinical preceptor, and the creator of Shadow Me Next. It is my pleasure to introduce you to incredible members of the healthcare field and uncover their unique stories, the joys and challenges they face, and what drives them in their careers. It's access you want and stories you need. Whether you're a pre-health student or simply curious about the healthcare field, I invite you to join me as we take a conversational and personal look into the lives and minds of leaders in medicine. I don't want you to miss a single one of these conversations, so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, which will automatically notify you when new episodes are dropped, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Shadow Me Next, where we will review highlights from this conversation and where I'll give you sneak previews of our upcoming guests. Today on Shadow Me Next, I am joined by the amazing Michaela Elrod, a dedicated speech-language pathologist whose passion for early intervention is literally changing lives one child at a time. Michaela shares her journey from dreaming of becoming a doctor to finding her true calling in speech therapy through a single, life-changing shadowing experience. In this episode, we'll explore the vital role of speech therapy in child development, the unique challenges and rewards of working with families, and the profound impact of early intervention on a child's future. Stay until the end to hear Michaela's amazing perspective on how partnering with parents and embracing vulnerability can create lifelong change, not just for children, but for entire families. Please keep in mind that the content of this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional medical advice. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Hi, Michaela. Thank you so much for joining us on Shadow Me Next. I'm so glad you're here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I cannot wait to talk to you about what you do. This is such an interesting part of medicine and something that I think a lot of us have had experience with either directly or peripherally. I know a lot of friends whose children have benefited from working with a speech language pathologist, which is what you do. I can't wait to dive into that with you. We'll start at the beginning. What drew you to medicine initially?
So when I was a little girl, I would line up all of my baby dolls and I would pretend that I was their doctor. From a young age, I've always known I wanted to go into medicine. My senior year of high school, I really thought that I wanted to be an OBGYN. I loved the thought of helping mamas and babies and working with babies all day. My cousin is an occupational therapist and her husband is a doctor. We got to talking about the work-life balance of what it's like to be, a woman in the medical field. And she's like, I really think that you would be an excellent speech pathologist. I work with them every day because I was having doubts about going into the med school route. I decided to shadow a speech pathologist. And from the first client I saw, I was like, this is exactly what I want. I'm still working heavily with parents and little babies, which is what I was drawn to. It took one time for me to shadow a speech therapist, and I declared that as my major my freshman year of college and never changed.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad that you determined what you wanted to do and you made that pivot based on talking to somebody else. Because I think so often that's how we make that realization. Shadowing is fantastic, in-person shadowing, but really just sitting down and having a conversation sometimes with a friend or someone that you trust their opinion on, somebody that you know is going to be honest with you.
Definitely.
With what they do. I'm so glad you said that. That's one of the big reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is, it doesn't replace in-person shadowing. You're not going to see them interacting with patients, but it is going to give you that trusted experience, that conversation that you might not have otherwise. I'm really glad that you had that experience. It sounds like her story is very similar to yours. I know your husband is also in medicine.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I am also really excited to dive into that because I do think a lot of times similar people attract each other. And in medicine, you can see a lot of couples who are both in medicine and it presents its own fair share of challenges. So when it comes to speech language pathology, what does the schooling look like for that? Is that something after college or instead of college? What does that look like?
Yes, so you will go to college and complete a 4-year degree, typically in speech pathology. My major was speech pathology and audiology, and I had a minor in psychology, which I found very helpful. Then after that, you will take your GRE and then you will apply to many grad schools. Then after you get into grad school, that is 2 years of schooling, and then you will complete a clinical fellowship in which you're working, but also being supervised. They might not be at your site, but you have to get certain supervision hours. After that, you will apply for your license and you are done. So it sounds very easy. And so it's definitely easier said than done. But yeah.
Is it a master's program? Do you get a title?
Yes,
It's
it is. It's
master's.
a
Okay.
master's. Yes.
Speech language pathology was not your undergraduate major. Could you go to graduate school for that, or do you have to kind of retool?
Yes, so you will have to take leveling classes. Different grad schools will call them different things, but there are some classes that you will have to take for classes that are necessary and you must have in order to go into grad school.
Yeah, it's
So,
so interesting. So it's a little bit different from being a PA, for example, right?
hmm
So as a PA, you can major in anything. An
yeah,
undergrad, it totally, and you could be an art history major. You can major in, pottery. It doesn't matter. You can major in anything as long as you took the prerequisite classes, biology, chemistry. It differs for different schools.
hmm
If you took those, you can still apply to PA school after you take the GRE, things like that. So it sounds like in order, to do speech language pathology, you really have to have a keen idea early or
definitely.
retool and take those classes. Tell me about the schooling, generally speaking. Was
Mhm.
it incredibly hard compared to what you studied in high school?
So in high school, I took all of the AP classes, AP biology, AP chemistry. I love school. I love to read. I definitely had a bit of a culture shock going from undergrad to grad school because in undergrad, a lot of the topics came very easily to me. In grad school, you're in a class or in a cohort of 40, typically girls. 40 girls are just as smart, if not smarter than you are. It's often very competitive, but you have to change the way you study. That's something I struggled with because learning a complete new routine, just a totally different look at studying because you just have mass and mass and mass amounts of information that you have to know. We say speech pathology is a profession that's womb to tomb. So you
Wow.
really have to know the lifespan. And it's a lot of information. I really had to change my thought processes towards studying quite a bit in grad school.
And that's
So,
interesting, especially coming from someone who loves school.
mm-hmm.
And I think that you have people who go into master's level positions who do love school. You have people, of course, who are just innately intelligent, but you also have people that really, really love school. And when you get there and you realize that the learning is very, very different, the way that they teach
Mm-hmm.
is very, very different. Sometimes it's a culture shock a little bit. And, the fact that your class was competitive, I'm so glad for that because I do
Mm-hmm.
think that it sharpens us and it pushes
Definitely.
us. But at the same time, we're all learning how to learn a little bit differently. So I think
Mhm.
overwhelming at first, and then you find your groove, right? I mean, by the end of
Yeah.
schooling, you find your groove, and then all of a sudden, you're actually working and seeing patients and that sort of thing. So it all pans out in the end. Good. So tell me, I want to know about a day in your life. I'm so excited to hear about what you do on the regular. I think it sounds like you work so hands on with your patients and
Mm-hmm.
their families. Walk us through what your day usually looks like.
So I tell everyone I'm the type of person I would rather work out at 5 a.m. than 5 p.m. Typically, my day starts at 4:45 a.m. I get up, go to the gym, come home. I like to have a little bit of a slower morning, so I give myself time to do my devotional, read, and get ready for the day and not be so insanely rushed. Then I'll eat breakfast, drive to work, and typically work from 9 to 5. I work in a private practice. Some days might be from 1 to 4, some days might be 8 to 6, but typically it's 9 to 5. Then after that, I will come home. My husband and I love to go on a walk every night. So we'll typically walk, make dinner. I will read or do something to kind of decompress at night. And then we start it all over again the next day.
I love the rhythm of that. That's really nice
Yeah,
knowing what to expect.
I'm a creature of habit. I
Mhm.
love the routine that I have created.
I do too. And I think that there's some people out there that are looking at us thinking, oof, how boring is their life? But that steadiness is what keeps me grounded. And there's enough chaos surrounding me. And I think if I can kind of control my daily rhythms,
hmm
that brings me joy.
During my work day, I sometimes have clients back to back. Then
Mm,
sometimes I will have a little bit of breaks in there and I'll lesson plan or session plan,
mhm.
write notes, do my charting things. I will be talking to parents. So there's lots of little things like that that might go on during my day too.
That's so fun. So when you're working with patients, what are some of the conditions that you usually see? What are some of the things that you're treating?
So, one of my favorite areas or kind of areas of expertise, I love the earlier intervention and preschool age. Preschool and toddlers are my absolute favorite age. I just think it's so special to work with those ages because they are at a critical time of development. If you get in there early and get them the therapy they need and start strong from the start, get that parent education, you can make amazing strides of growth, especially early intervention. Getting in there as soon as you possibly can and getting your therapies can make a lifelong impact on a child. I love the early preschool ages. I work with children with developmental disabilities, autism, Down syndrome, pretty much any type of disorder. I work with a lot of very interesting clients that might not have a disorder. We're trying to figure out what might be going on that we don't really know yet because they're so young, but we know something is not right. And then also work with children that are just typically developing and they're just late talkers. So I have a few of those as well. So I have seen quite a bit of different cases and things, but I would say I primarily work with children with autism.
Amazing. So, how does that work? Does the child's pediatrician, if they have a pediatrician that they trust, does the child's pediatrician make a referral, or does the parent just find you and seek you out and say, I think there's something going on with my child that I'd like to talk to you about?
So it can go both ways. Parents can reach out to us and we have people do that daily, but also we get a lot of referrals from pediatricians, and even referrals from preschools, referrals from other schools. So it can come in a variety of different ways.
That's neat. And I'm so grateful that parents have that outlet too, because I think a lot of times in the healthcare system, we can feel very trapped because we
hmm
feel like there's something wrong as parents. I am a parent. I have two daughters, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. You can feel trapped because you're waiting on a referral. You're trying to convince your pediatrician perhaps that you feel there's something wrong. So I'm so
hmm
glad that they have that outlet where they can reach out to you and you guys can work through it. Let's talk a little bit about early intervention because I think that's a word that people might not be familiar with. And it sounds like it is so important to your practice.
So that is the age of birth to 3, typically even birth to 2, but that is mainly focused on parent education. And a lot of our early intervention clients we see in the home. My approach, at least when I'm thinking about early intervention, I want to talk to the parents and do parent coaching and give them strategies that they can use throughout their day, whether that's breakfast time, bath time, little things they can embed in their day to make their lives not only easier, but also get their child talking. They want their child talking. And not only that, but, there's so many steps that go before talking. You've got eye contact. Okay, if we can't get eye contact, a child is not going to be talking in sentences at age 2. But really, it's just getting that parent coaching. If I see a child in home, something I like to do is I do not take any of my own materials. I use everything in the home because when I'm not there, I come in with all these bells and whistles and my bag of toys. And of course, the child wants to interact with me and they want to see what I brought that day. But when I'm not there, they don't have those toys. I want to show the parents what they have in their house, whether it is literally a cardboard box, how they can make that work for their child. And this strategies, routines they can do with the toys that they already have and not making them feel like they have to go buy the next hot item, giving them strategy they can do with what they already have.
There's so much I want to say to that. This is fantastic. First and foremost, thank you for doing that because as you were talking about all the bells and whistles, I was thinking about all of the things as a parent that I would try to buy to encourage my child to communicate with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets so expensive. All the
Oh,
Melissa and
yeah.
Doug toys that I can think of, everything that pops up on Amazon, I'll think, ooh, let me try that. Ooh, let me try that. The fact that you come into their home and use what they already have and you provide the parents with those tools of just
Hmm.
things that are just laying around their house. Thank you for that. That's huge. And we all know kids would much prefer a cardboard box over the toy that
Right.
comes in it. Anyway, as medical providers, I think, and this is me speaking honestly, I think as medical providers, we're very used to the limelight. We're very used to the spotlight, right? We walk into the
Hmm.
room and we have our bright white coats on. Sometimes they're like bedazzled with sparkly pins. We have all the
Right.
gadgets. We run the appointment. Obviously, we're communicating and we're working with the patient. But ultimately, we walk in, we determine when we start, and we leave. We kind of determine when it ends. It's
Hmm.
we kind of are on center stage, and I think a lot of medical providers like that. You mentioned that you're trying to just kind of assimilate into their daily life. You walk in, you're not bringing a bag of fun stuff. You don't want the kid to be focused on you. You're
Hmm.
just partnering with their parent, their caregiver, the person helping this child. It sounds like a really beautifully humble aspect of medicine that I think would resonate with a lot of people. Is that true?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And I think one thing about speech is we work so much with parents. Parents, I don't want to say that they're desperate for information, but they are so hungry for information. They want anything they can get to help their child. And I think they are showing you one of the most vulnerable parts of their life. They're not going to tell their best friend that their child is not talking and really struggling with that, but they're going to be really honest with you and really vulnerable, and being able to just be a source to them and let them know that you are there for them, I think is something that's really special.
No, I love that. And it's probably great that you minored in psychology specifically for that reason. I'm sitting here thinking about my pediatrics rotation in school and how much I loved working with children and how difficult I found it was working with their parents only because I had 20 minutes. And,
Right.
and half of that time, I was trying to evaluate their child quickly, head to toe, all the things. And then you're right. The parents are hungry for information and they're desperate to know this can be a perfectly healthy child. And they're still
Exactly.
desperate for information. They don't have any concerns about their kid, but they want to know X, Y, and Z. I find that very taxing sometimes. But in your position, you're equipped to answer all of their questions and to partner with them and walk alongside them through some really scary, complicated things. And, I'm sure that they're frustrated that they're in that position, but they're so grateful to have your care. Tell us, if you can, about a particularly difficult situation, if you've ever been in one, and how it kind of changed the way that you view things, or perhaps even changed the way that you practice.
I think there's difficult situations every day. You're going to have a client that you just cannot figure out their behavior, or you might have a difficult parent that is questioning everything you do. For me personally, it's something that I struggle with and I think is hard.
Mhm.
It's keeping your energy levels up throughout the day. I sometimes get down on myself because the speech therapist I am at 8 a.m. might look a little different than the speech therapist I am at 4 p.m. And I get down on myself because I want to provide that same quality of care at 4 p.m. that I did at 8 a.m. because that child is so deserving of that. So, I think learning how, if you're a specialist, learning how to fuel your body correctly, you know, figure out what you need to do in the mornings to get prepared for the day. But yeah, just learning how to keep your energy levels up because 2-year-olds are very exhausting. And
Mhm.
now I will say I do work with elementary school, I work with middle school. I've even had clients that are in their 20s. But typically I do work with the younger ones, and even the kids in 3rd and 4th grade. They want to do all the things too. And they want you to be super high energy and they want to play pretend. They want to do all the things. That is a difficult thing to balance.
So it goes back to what you were saying about your routine too. Work is exhausting.
Yeah.
And work with a 2-year-old and their concerned caregiver or parent. And at the same time, you're not just playing with the child, you are also evaluating the child, looking around, trying to find the tools that you're going to use to
Right.
teach the parents too. I think where burnout comes in, this is a huge
Definitely.
topic and you feel it towards the end of the day. It's this cycle and it just takes a little bit more of you every single day. But
Mm-hmm.
that's why it is so important to have that lifestyle that you have outside of the office. I think people poo-poo hobbies and exercise and diet and say, well, yes, of course we want to be this perfect person because that's going to make us feel good, but that's also going to make us work better and serve our patients better and be able to get down on the floor with that 2-year-old at 4 o'clock in the afternoon without having all of your coffee and really
Yeah.
perform and do your job and what you need to do. It's motivating.
Mhm. Thank you.
It's very motivating. So, when you have, let's talk about autism a little bit because it's something that it can feel very mysterious if you don't have a child who has autism. It
Mm-hmm.
is a spectrum disorder, which means there are children who have a more obvious effect on their life from
Mm-hmm.
autism. And then there are children who have a less obvious effect. Do you work with children on the whole spectrum? Do you get to pick and choose the severity of your cases? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I have worked with children on the whole spectrum. I've never seen two children with autism look the same. Before I moved to Miami, I worked in a school with very low functioning children. Every child on my caseload was in a wheelchair or had some type of physical disability. Now I work with the whole spectrum. It keeps things interesting. Two are the same. I work with low functioning all the way to high functioning, so much so you might not, if you met them, you might not know they have autism.
Wow, that's really interesting. It is, I think it's a very difficult condition because of that. You mentioned that you've worked in schools too, Michaela. So you've worked
Yeah.
in a variety of different settings, schools, private practice, home
Mhm.
therapy. How do those environments differ in terms of patient care, for example?
Yes. So I also did a rotation in a hospital and I was on the acute
My
setting. So I've done
goodness.
that as well. So
Wow. Everywhere.
yeah, so I've had a taste of everything. But this school is going to be focused more on group therapy. You might have 70, 80 kids on your caseload and you are doing groups of therapy in five kids in your group, typically 30-minute sessions. They're quick. In your private practice, that is going to be your individualized care. I see some kids 30 minutes, I see some kids for an hour, I see some kids for 2 hours. They're typically individual sessions. So I do a lot of, different things with that. And then the home therapy, the private practice I work at now, we do home therapy. But we also have contracts with schools. So I've also had experience of being a contract worker in a school and not
Oh,
necessarily working actually for the school. And then, like I said, home therapy typically is your early intervention. And then school contracts, that's almost like private practice, but you're just
mhm.
going into the school and pulling the child out for the session. And then the hospital, obviously, I did acute care and then I did inpatient and outpatient rehab during that rotation. So, and obviously your hospital setting, which I did three different kind of sectors in your hospital setting for your adults, but those are a lot more fast paced. And I do think the school setting is definitely more fast paced than private practice because you have faster sessions.
No, that makes sense. So when you're in the hospital doing acute care, you're not bringing toys in, trying to teach them how to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Is this after like an injury and they're relearning how to do things?
Yeah. So, well, that is more so with your adults. So, I worked with adults that had strokes or traumatic brain injuries, things like that.
As a speech language pathologist, you can specialize in either age or disorders, which sounds like they probably go a little hand in hand.
Yes.
Very cool.
I tell everyone there's not much of a difference between a child and an adult. They both get excited by a lot of the things that we get excited by. So there's a lot of similarities I've found over the years between the two settings, even though they seem polar opposite.
It sounds like such a fun job.
It is.
After every single episode, I go and I talk to my husband. I'm like, listen to this speech language pathologist. And he goes, Ash, you're not changing careers. I said, I know, I don't want to. I love being a PA, but
Right.
just getting to speak with you about what you do and seeing how passionate you are about it, it gives me so much hope for medicine
Mm-hmm.
and for those interested in medicine. I think, like you said, once upon a time, we were all playing with our Dr. Barbies or our
Mm-hmm.
Dr. G.I. Joes, if that was your thing. And we didn't really, nobody ever said, oh, you should be a PA or, oh, you should be a speech
Right.
language pathologist. Something we had to discover later more as an adult. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you again for shedding all the light on all of this. I am so excited about it. So
Thank you.
let's talk about quality questions. This is a segment in the show where we talk about something that you've been asked or something that you
Mm-hmm.
have asked. That's been just really memorable. Do you have a quality question? Before we hear what Michaela's quality question is, keep in mind that there's more interview prep, such as mock interviews and personal statement review over on shadowmenext.com. There you'll find amazing resources to help you as you prepare to answer your own quality questions.
Whenever I was applying to grad schools, I applied to LSU. And one of the interview questions they asked me was, what was the most recent book I had read that was not related to speech pathology? For the GRE, I was trying to get into grad school. I'm trying to read all of my textbooks, do all the things. I had not touched an actual book for fun in so long. I was so thrown off by that question. And I was, at this time, this was in 2020. So I was looking around my room, like, what is the most book, finding a book around my room. But it made me realize you need to have hobbies and something outside of your profession. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you will go through seasons where you are busier than others, but I try to read before bed every single night. Just carving out even 5 minutes of your day to do something for you can make a huge difference. I thought that was such a good question because it threw me off because I was so prepared to answer why I wanted to go to that school and why I want to be a speech therapist. I was not prepared for a question about myself related to my hobbies. So I thought that was a really good one.
That is a great one. Thank you for sharing that. And I think in the same seat, I probably would have panicked as well. Probably would have said Harry Potter or the Bible or something like that. Yeah. If I were asked that question now, and I'm not a really avid reader now, I love listening to audiobooks. It's one of my favorite things. And I like reading books that will give me information. I've listened to a couple of fantastic finance books recently. My husband's in finance. So part of the reason is so I can speak intelligently with him. And part of the reason is everybody needs to know about finance. If you're making money, then you should probably know how to manage it. But a lot of those questions about hobbies that are specific, tell me about a book you've read or a trip you've taken. If that is not your thing and the interviewer is asking you that, people pivot. Say, I understand that people really love reading and they're passionate about reading. That does not bring me joy, especially at the end of the day when I've had my nose buried in a textbook for 12 hours. What brings me joy is exercising or sitting down with my friends and watching trash TV. And let me tell you why that actually is important to me. And I think you can you can spin it really well, but in the moment, it does feel it kind of makes you feel bad about yourself. Like, oh, I haven't read a book.
Right. And like I said, LSU was one of my top grad schools. I was really prepared for this interview. I was so nervous. It was just not on my radar at all. But I ended up getting into LSU. So my Bible response did work, I guess. But I was not expecting it for sure. Definitely expect a few off the wall questions in your interviews.
That's a really good point. And I think that's why I love this quality question segment so much, is because you do get to hear some of the things that threw us for loops when we were doing interviews. Michaela, when you were looking at LSU as a school, if you can remember, what were some of the things that you researched or some of the things you looked at when you were trying to prepare for that interview?
So there were a lot of different things I looked at. I applied to 8 different grad schools. A lot of people don't know this, but it is very competitive to get into grad school for speech pathology because so many people are applying. I looked at grad schools I knew people at, so I could ask about their experience. I knew a few people that had gone to LSU, so I'd ask them about their experience. They had amazing experience. So I was like, okay, done. But I also looked at their facilities and not necessarily like, do they have places that I can internship at? Because you have to do a certain amount of internships, externships. Some grad schools will make you find your own, and then some schools will place you with people. They were one of the ones that placed you where you needed to be. So I didn't have to worry about that. So that was a huge pull for me.
Absolutely. The same for PA school and in many other schools, I think. In school, having to go and try to find these rotations. And I'm not sure about for you, but for PAs, our supervising physicians on our rotations are not compensated financially most of the time. So it's voluntary for them. And having a student for however long and training that person for free, or as I like to say, for pride of profession, it's a big undertaking for them. So it can be quite difficult to find that. So thank you. I know we didn't discuss it or talk about that, but it's a really great thing. Let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk about your spouse, if that's okay, what it looks like for you to have a spouse in medicine, because I think being a medical spouse is challenging. Tell us a little bit about your husband and his journey, but more importantly, how you're feeling and how you're supporting him.
Yes. So my husband is a third year medical student. We live in Miami, Florida. It is very hard. I think a lot of people see the glitz and the glam of being a doctor, but people do not understand the sacrifice that goes into that. My husband studies pretty much every waking hour. Even on our honeymoon this past May, he studied every single morning because he had his board exam the next month. It's so much sacrifice. You know, we live down here in Miami. We left all of our friends and family, and then we will move again for residency. A lot of people don't realize the sacrifice, not only financially, but also personally, being away from so many people. But I will also say it is fun at times because he understands my profession. I understand his profession. We've had so many fun conversations over the years about different experiences that a lot of spouses don't get to have. It is very hard on me. I want to know that I'm supporting him enough, and I get down on myself and I'm like, am I doing enough to support him? Because he's going through a lot. It's hard. It's challenging. And I don't think people talk about it enough until I had talked to other spouses and they're like, yeah, it's very hard. So yeah.
What's your recommendation for somebody who's going to find themselves in that position, whether they're medical or not? You know, perhaps they might not know specifically what it is about what their spouse is studying that is making their life so hard. But if you know your spouse or your significant other or your partner, you should know that they're having a hard time. What's your recommendation when you kind of see that? What's your first step?
Something I do before I even get to that point is we try to carve out at least 10 to 15 minutes of quality time every night. We like to walk every night. We have a little walking trail that's by our apartment. We always eat dinner without our phones, even if that's just the only time we have during that day to sit down and look at each other and have a conversation. Carving out 10 minutes every day to get that quality time in, then I think you can ask those questions like, how are you feeling? How can I support you? How can I be a better spouse? And being honest both ways, him knowing that he can be vulnerable with me, but also I know that I can ask him also for the same things. But yeah, I think just spending quality time together and being honest, and before you even get to that point where you're desperate for that support.
No, thank you for speaking so much on this because it's so important. And I know in previous episodes, we've talked a little bit about mentorship and how mentorship really guides us. A lot of times it supports us and motivates us. And then our partnerships and our relationships are just mentorships on like super duper uber steroids. Right?
Exactly.
Whether you work in the same profession or not, you are witnessing each other's hobbies. You're witnessing that person being constructive or destructive with their time. Just as I expect my mentors to step in and say, Ash, let's move back this way a little bit.
Right.
I also expect that from my spouse, family, and friends as well. I think we speak about mentorship like it's just one person and it's some old gray haired guy that went to school 50 years before you did, but that's not true. I have mentors much younger than me as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, my spouse and my family are one of my biggest places where I seek that mentorship and guidance. Thank you for speaking on that. I think it's great to hear you're laying very strong foundations. So while we wrap up, what advice would you give to someone interested in medicine, just generally speaking, because you can speak on that, your husband, and you have navigated that whole road. And then what advice would you give specifically to someone who's been listening and who says, that sounds fantastic. I want her life. I want her job. I want to do what she does.
So my number one answer would be to shadow, which is so funny, shadow me next, but to go and shadow what you think you want to do. My husband shadowed many doctors. He really wants to do orthopedic surgery, but he didn't know he wanted to do that until he shadowed several different people. I mean, he's shadowed dermatologists. You need to really think about what you might want to do. Go shadow a few. Then after those first few, they might guide your next. Let me try this. So you might pivot a little bit. I think with speech, I would recommend shadowing PT, OT, and speech. And then also figure out your why. That can really direct your path. You might be a speech pathology major your freshman year, and you might graduate with a degree in business because of things pivoting. I just really think about leaning into that why, and then also shadowing other people and getting thoughts from other people. I would never be a speech therapist if it wasn't for my cousin redirecting my path and shadowing some.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because I created this podcast for that exact reason. I had student after student for 10 years of practice that I hosted as shadows while I was confident in the experience I was providing them. I have 2 daughters, and one day they'll come to me and say, Mom, I love what you do, but I don't know if I want to be a PA. What else is out there? This is all I know, how to be a PA. A part of this podcast was me realizing there's more out there. I always knew I wanted to go into medicine, specifically wanted to be a PA, and I'm very satisfied with that. But in order to be a better PA, a better medical provider, to do right by my kids and my friends' kids, exploring these avenues was on my heart. And the students who have the opportunity to shadow in person, Shadow Me Next does not replace that experience. What I'm hoping is by listening to the stories on Shadow Me Next, they will realize, hey, this sounds like me. This sounds like where my heart is. This sounds like something I want to do. I'm going to start researching speech language pathologists close to me. I'm going to start being specific with my requests and see. And then maybe I'll shadow an orthopedic surgeon, since we talked about that too, and just to compare. Comparison is going to be the biggest thing for these people. And I'm so glad you brought that up. This is amazing. I want to go hug my kids now. I want to make sure like I hug all the parents, just because you've motivated me so much to be good and be better. And
oh, thank you so much. It's been such an honor. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Shadow Me Next. If you liked this episode, or if you think it could be useful for a friend, please subscribe and invite them to join us next Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know on Facebook or Instagram. Access you want, stories you need. You're always invited to Shadow Me Next.